why do you need an income statement? Really the income statement just measures, what's happening in your business in a period of time. It's a snapshot of a period of business. It could be 3 months, 1 month, 1 year, typically just no more than your business cycle. But it's really just to measure the state of what that period was. So it's already happened. If you run your 2014 financial statements, you can't improve them anymore. It's too late. So they are hindsight looking. But it really just, it's a detailed reporting of your income and expenses broken down by meaningful categories. And I'm going to challenge you a little bit as we go through this to try and develop those categories a little bit more. But it's really just something that you're measuring what you have already done. Setting up your financial statements. This is probably the meat and meat and gravy, meat and potatoes of this presentation a little bit. When you set up your financial statement, you really have to sit down and step back and try and identify, what do I want to track? And again, don't just download a chart of accounts and do this, but what do I want to track? How do I lay out my financial statement so that gives me information that helps me run my business? So identify specific items that need tracking. Now, what's the first thing everybody thinks of? Sales, right? And if you kind of think a little bit, I always like to kind of give people a reference to as you're thinking about this. Who in here has never heard of, been to, walked by, driven by a tavern in the state of Wisconsin? Nobody raised their hands. Okay. So we all understand, what's sold at a tavern. You've got wine, you've got beer, you've got soda, you could have food, you could have some gambling machines. So there's a lot of buckets of revenue that you want to look at. So you step back and you say, okay, well, I'm going to set up a financial statement for a tavern. What do I need to look at? Well, alcohol and food, right? Just 2 categories. Yep, nope. No, you need to break it out into more categories. Why? Because what's the margin on a tap beer? What's the margin on a can of beer? What's the margin on a glass of wine? What's the margin on soda? They're all drastically different. Analytical tools, big one to track, especially if you're in any type of a product-based business or, bid type business. Gross margin. What do I expect? If I'm a tavern, I should understand my gross margin should be, 40% to 60%, whatever, depending on if I got food and not food. I have an expectation of a range, and I can actually go out into industry books and find out that, what are the margins based on my business and get some information. Net margin, overall profit as a percentage of sales, very important to, bottom line is always important. So it's kind of nice to have an expectation. Times interest earned, really just kind of tracks your ability to meet interest payments on debt. Now, Mike, what do you guys call it? It's not times interest earned. Debt coverage ratio, DCR, is it? DCR. Yeah, debt service coverage ratio. So the mistakes, we talked a lot about those. Too complex, too much detail. Good thing is you can use the software's capabilities to shrink that up and give you the detail where you need it. I think the biggest financial statement mistakes, Al, you can tell me if I'm wrong, people don't read their financial statements. I got my checkbooks balanced in my QuickBooks program, off to the next thing. Great. I could pound the last nail into the framing, but if I didn't secure the frame to the decking, I'm going to have a next windstorm. My house is going to be in the neighbor's lot. You need to look at what you're doing. I think the biggest thing is people don't read them is because they don't understand what they're saying. And that's kind of where repetition is going to come into it. When you read financial statements, you develop an expectation, you develop a comfort level with it, but it takes repetition. It really does. If you give a guy who used a hammer for his entire life in construction, you give him an air nailer, he's not going to be that much more efficient with the air nailer because he's not used to the nuances, the connecting, the hose, the different things. The weight could be, the guy could whip a hammer out, been doing it for 30 years, he's got muscle memory. But over time, the air nailer becomes drastically more efficient. Well, it's kind of the same in reading financial statements.